All right, we're going to have to start over. Hopefully this is correct. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Hello, quilters. Sharon, Janice. Sound. Whew. Yay. I try and check everything beforehand. So yes, wonderful. Hello, ladies. Hi, Copper. Wonderful. Joanne's out there. Hello. Jackie. Wonderful's here. Yay. Sharon. All right. And there goes Benita. Wonderful. Wow. All right. We are all set. How was your week? I'm so glad to be with you. Wonderful to be with you tonight. I am looking forward to talking about how to quilt a cathedral window quilt. Have you made a cathedral window? Hey, Blanche. Hello. How are you? Lorraine. Lorraine, hello. How are you? Awesome. The week flew by. That it sure did. I can't believe we were here a week ago. It seems like yesterday. And there's Sherry. Hello. How are you? Awesome. So glad. Yeah, the week went by. The weather has been really nice here in Virginia, nice and moderate and cool. I did a little bit of yard work, had a dentist appointment. There goes Sabrina. Everyone say hello to one another. Awesome. Oh, you thought it was your computer. I'm so glad that it wasn't. My mistake on the sound. I'm going to make sure I check every scene that the audio is working. So, can you believe that this is the 11th quilt conversation? I can't believe that this is the 11th time that we've been together. And we've covered a lot of ground. Tonight, we're going to look at the cathedral window. Did I ask if you've made the cathedral window before? Let me know in the comments, in the chat. Have you made the cathedral window? Let's see, who else? Love the hearts. Yeah, they're fun, aren't they? All right. Oh, there goes Monica. Hi, Monica. Welcome. So glad you're here. It took forever. So you've made Joan the cathedral window. It took forever. It was one of those techniques or quilt projects that was on my bucket list to learn how to do. So I made a small one. I didn't make a very big one. And there are a lot of tutorials out there. The one that I used is from Missouri Star Quilt Company. Jenny Dolan has an easy, what I think is an easy cathedral window pattern. If you haven't seen that video, check it out on the YouTube video in the description for today. I have linked to Jenny's video. So if you haven't seen it, take a look at it. That's the method I used for the cathedral that we're going to go through tonight. I did make a couple of modifications, which I'll talk about. All right. Hello. Yay. Melody is here too. Awesome. All right. Well, we're going to start with a game. We're going to go back to our Jeopardy game from last week. We did not finish it. And if you haven't been here before and you haven't played Jeopardy, now Blanche, you haven't made a cathedral window quilt yet. Is it on your list? Do you plan to make one? Maybe. I hope so. It's a fun project. It certainly has a lot of different techniques that can help you in your quilting process, your learning. So if you remember with Jeopardy, we're going to have 4 different topics: quilt receivers, living water free motion quilting designs, quilting threads, things that we know about threads for quilting, And then lastly, when I sew, I also do. Sherry, curves, no. You don't like to sew curves? Cathedral Window is a little bit of curves, but it isn't. Yeah, it is and it isn't. And that's kind of why I like it. I'm not very good at stitching curves. That's a skill that I'm still learning and practicing. So with Jeopardy, we choose a topic and then we choose points. So for 100 points, who is the little human that receives a quilt? The category is receiver. We're just going to do a quick run through first. Who's the little human that receives a quilt? The little human. Yes, that would be the baby. Correct, correct. What is a baby? All right. Correct. Who is a baby? So who wants to pick one? Pick a... Yep, Sharon, correct. What is a baby? Melody, yep, baby, correct. Someone else now. Now that you know how the game is played, pick a category and then pick a point value. 300, 400. Hey, Tina, welcome. Awesome. So glad you're here. I hope you had a good week. I did get a chance to sew this week. I'm working on a secret project for Make Modern magazine. All right, someone pick. All right, Copper picked Living Water Quilter for 300. That would be the quilting designs. Let's try that. Shining point in night sky. Shining point in night sky. What would that be? Remember, this is a free motion quilting design. And Blanche, I'll get you next when I sew for 200. This is a Living Water Quilter free motion quilting design. Sharon, you got it. What is a star? What is a star? Correct. Janice, correct. What is a star? I like North Star too. That's cool. What is a star? Awesome. You got it. Awesome, ladies. Okay. And I think, Blanche, you said sew for 200. When I sew for 200. If you were here last week, I think this may have been one of the questions that we had last time. When I sew, I also, what do you do? When I sew, I also sew with, gave you a little hint there. When I sew, I also sew with others. Drink coffee. Yes. You ladies are funny. Sew with a buddy. When you're not alone, you're sewing with a friend. I sew with a friend. What are podcasts? That would be something that you listen to when you sew, not something about not being alone. When we're not alone, we're with others, right? What is a pet? I like that. That's true. Many ladies sew with their cats and their little puppies and friends. That's correct, Sabrina. Awesome. All right. What was another one that someone picked? Let's see. Joan, you picked I sew for 300, so we'll do that one. When I sew, I also sounds make feet happy. Sound makes feet happy. When I sew, I also, and when I do this, the sound makes my feet happy. Okay. What is music? Yes. Music. Got it. Awesome. That's it. What is listen to music? Do you listen to music when you sew? Listen to an audiobook? Watch a movie? What's your favorite thing to do when you sew? Yes, Blanche. Awesome. What is listen to music? That's it. Hey, Nancy, I just noticed you're there. Hi, welcome. Yes. So, what is music? That's right. So, Blanche, not Blanche, I'm sorry, Nancy. Are you saying that when you sew and you listen to your and drink wine, it makes your feet happy? You do some movement with your feet? Okay, Sherry watches TV when she sews. Listen to podcasts by Sharon. Watch Netflix. Watching some movies. Watch Hallmark movies. You dance, Nancy. All right. How do you do that and sew? Is that in between seams? You're getting up and doing a little dance? Listening to your sewing machine makes your feet happy, especially when it sounds good and it's purring along. All right, let's go for one more, then we're going to get to that cathedral window. One more. I think we've picked every category tonight except for you ladies are funny. All right, one more. This is the last one, and then we're going to move on. Someone pick something from quilting threads. That's the only category we haven't picked tonight. All right. Threads for 100. All right, here we go. We had this last week, but for those who weren't here, companion to a 9014 needle. Companion to a 1914 needle. Hello, Wilda. Quilting threads for 100. Companion to 9014 needle. All right. Who has that answer? 40 weight. All right. Yes. Wonderful. What is 40 weight thread? Fantastic. Got it. Yep. Well done. Awesome. Fabulous, ladies. All right. I think that is it for tonight, you think? Should we do one more or go straight to the cathedral window quilt? What are your thoughts? I think you might be ready for the cathedral window quilt. Give me a yes or a thumbs up or a smiley face. Let me know. One more thread, Copper says. All right. Should I do quilting thread for 500? We never seem to get to those 500 points. I'm going to do that. I'm going to pick one this time. All right. Here we go. Emotional thread. Emotional thread. Hello, Amanda. How are you? I'm so glad. I love you too. Thanks for joining us tonight. Do you know the answer to this, Mandy? Amanda? Everyone say hello to my niece, Mandy. Her and her husband are soon to have baby number 2. Congratulations to Mandy and Darnell. Oh, that's an interesting answer, Nancy. Variegated thread for emotional thread. What is sulky? I like that one. Oh, that's funny. What is variegated thread? I like the sulky one. Oh, thank you for congratulating my niece and her husband. Thank you, Sharon and Copper. All right, one more. Anyone else with an emotional thread? Uh, all right. No other responses. Okay, I will reveal the answer, but the answer really should be sulky thread. I didn't even think about using sulky thread. You like that one too, Monica. All right, here's what the answer that I have. What is cross wound? The thread is cross, upset. But I think sulky is better. Yeah, Sharon, I like sulky too. Yeah, but cross wound thread, as you know, on the spool creates a cross. You like that one too, Janice? Yeah, okay. Oh, now you get it, Copper. Yeah, it's funny. Yay. All right, ladies. That was a good way to end our time of Jeopardy for this round. We might go back to it next week. Maybe I need to get some more answers and questions for you. But let's go straight to this Cathedral Window quilt. This is a project I made in 2018. Boy, time does fly. And it was for Island Boutique. Again, it was as an ambassador project. And each month we had a different theme. And this theme was try something new. So I had never made a cathedral window. You like it, Sharon? Thank you. It has several techniques. And since I wanted to try this, I thought, well, let me go to YouTube and see who has tutorials. So I end up seeing Jenny Dolan's Cathedral Window quilt tutorial, and I like the way she did it. But I do have a couple of things that I changed to make it simpler for me. And if you know or have learned anything about me, I like things in order and steps. I like to break things down into steps. Whenever we have more steps, that means that if I make a mistake on this step, it doesn't it allows me to backtrack. If you combine too many steps into one step, it can cause problems. And you'll see a little bit more about what I mean when we go through this. Let's look at the first thing. How did I piece it? If you haven't seen Jenny's tutorial, she puts together each cathedral window separately. And then she says, when you're ready to sew down the edges, that's when you turn them over. But I thought, I don't want to have to fiddle with rolling those bias edges underneath the machine. I want them rolled over and pressed. Then the next step was to actually glue baste them down. So once I got to the machine, they were ready to stitch and they weren't going to move. So does that make sense to everyone, why I would do that? First time you've seen one quilted. Okay. And let's see. Hi, Rosemary. Hi, nice. I'm so glad you're here. Awesome. Okay, that makes sense. Great. So then the next step, I would make rows or columns. I would make each block, glue basting down the pretty fabric for the inside the cathedral window, glue baste them. Then I would stitch that row or column together, adding the next step. And then each row or column would be sewn together. You can see that in this image. Not yet. Doesn't make sense, not yet. Okay. When you go see Jenny's video, you'll see that she puts together the pieces for the cathedral window. When it's time to roll over those beautiful curves, she rolls those curves over and holds them in place while she's at the sewing machine. I prefer to roll those nice bias edges that create that beautiful curve and glue baste them in place with heat before I take it to the machine. That way they're not going to move, they're all in place. Okay, then now I'm not going to go through the whole tutorial on how to make a cathedral window quilt because this is all about quilting, how to quilt a cathedral window quilt. If you want to learn how to make it, I do recommend looking at Jenny's process and then visiting. Another interesting one is from Shabby Fabrics. They have another tutorial so that you can see the different methods and see which one you like. Jenny's was a little bit simpler for me with a little bit extra with the glue basting. I just felt like the glue basting helped keep these pieces in place when I brought it to the sewing machine. Okay, so now the whole thing has been sewn and glue basted. Those rolled edges that create the cathedral window and the fabric in the cathedral window are glue basted. The only thing that has stitches at this point are the seams that stitch each block, each cathedral window block together. Okay? Is everyone okay on this part so far? Again, if you haven't made this before, it might sound a little confusing, but once you go visit Jenny's video, you'll understand a little bit more. I just wanted to give you some context to my stitching process before actually showing you how it was quilted. Got it so far? Great, Copper. All right, wonderful. Sherry, anyone else? Rosemary, Sharon, Nancy, everyone's okay? All right, I will continue. Hello, wonderful. Thank you, LaForest in Washington. Awesome. So glad you're here. Everyone say hello. Great. So the next thing that we do, now I can take it to the machine. I don't have to fiddle with those rolled edges on the cathedral window because they are glue basted down. I take it to the machine, and Jenny shows you this in her video. I stitch down with a straight stitch over those rolled edges. But here's another major difference. In Jenny's video, she suggests and she demonstrates that you stitch these rolled edges at the same time you make your quilt sandwich. So it becomes a quilt as you go project. I broke that down to 2 steps rather than 1 step. I didn't want to stitch these rolled edges and quilt it to the batting and back. There's too much curving and movement of this cathedral window to try and move, I think, batting and backing, and there was likely to be more mistakes or errors doing it that way. So yes, that is top stitching. So I'm top stitching right on top of those rolled edges. They're glue basted down, they're not going to move, and I can easily top stitch all those cathedral windows when it's just the quilt top only. So that is one of the steps that's going to help me free motion quilt and ruler quilt this project. I do not like the idea of doing 2 steps into one. I mean, you could, but if you have a small machine, you don't have a lot of space between the needle and the back, trying to move that cathedral window without messing things up, I didn't want that headache. All right, so that's now. After all of the cathedral windows were top stitched, then I can make my quilt sandwich. I made the quilt sandwich, and before I quilted it, with the different designs and the crosshatch, I stabilized the quilt by stitching along every curve and along the edge of the quilt. You see that red border? I stitched right in along that seam. You can kind of see the edges of that fabric come up because it's stitched down and it's pushing that little strip of red upwards. Can you ladies see that? So the process was to top stitch all the cathedral windows so they're all in place. Then take that and make a quilt sandwich. Then a straight stitch with a walking foot to stitch the top and the batting and the back. Stabilize that quilt sandwich by stitching along the curves, not on the cathedral window, but on the background. It's not stitching down the cathedral window, but the background inside those curves. Okay, and then stitching the edge, the square edge. Once that was done, now I need to stitch, or I wanted to stitch, I didn't need to, I wanted to stitch designs inside each of those wedges around the cathedral windows and along the perimeter. I decided not to quilt inside the fabric in the window, but only to quilt around the window. So I took my plexiglass, and this is my plexiglass with red duct tape along the edge. How many of you use red duct tape? Are the comments still coming through? I'm just double checking here. All right, catching on. Good, good. All right. Is that making sense, ladies? There's a lot of steps here. Should I repeat that? So we made each individual cathedral window. We glue basted the fabric in the window, glue basted the rolled edges, then top stitched those rolled edges so that they would stay in place for the quilting process. You don't use plexiglass. Okay. And Copper said, can you repeat? Duct tape, how? So I just go to Home Depot or Lowe's, and they have pre-cut plexiglass, 8.5 by 11, 11 by 14, 20 by 24 inches, various sizes. I took an 8.5 by 11 plexiglass. Then I got duct tape, and I put duct tape along the edge because then I can put that plexiglass on top of my quilt sandwich, use a whiteboard marker, and practice potential designs right on top of the quilt. And that's what you see in this image. You see the plexiglass on top of the quilt sandwich, and I'm previewing potential designs to fill that space. And then I would just use a whiteboard eraser if I didn't like it, and I try something else. Show you here. Here's another one that I did a preview of what design to fill in those spaces. I'm glad you like that idea. Having the red tape shows me my limits so I don't mark my quilt. Yes, it's a fast and easy way. Now, the small size works on certain sizes. You might find that you want something bigger, enough to cover, say, a 12-inch block. If the average quilt block that you make is 12 inches, you would want a plexiglass that's going to cover that space so that you can preview your design. Okay, you like that idea too. Great. Wonderful. Well, I'm not afraid of that because the tape is there as a border to prevent me from getting it on. And I use protective paste and washable markers. That's a great idea. Awesome. That's a new idea to you. Okay, great. Give it a try. Just be careful. And I don't know if a washable marker would work on plexiglass, but that's something that I'm thinking about. Maybe we could try and see if it will work. And that way, if for some reason we go off the plexiglass, no harm done. So that's what I did. And I want to show you, here's one design that I thought I would use in that space. Here's another potential design. Which one do you like? That's one. It's kind of feather plumes, right? Here's another one. These are loops. Here's another potential design. What do you think about this one? These are pearls or circles. Good observation, but they are directional. Good observation. When filling this kind of space, why would a directional design not work? Why would you want something that's not directional? You like the plumes. Okay, Sherry. The other thing about the feathers is that they would require a lot of thread, too much thread in that small space. You see how you'd have to go back? There'd be 2 layers of thread every single time. You like the second one? Okay. So those are some considerations. How much thread buildup would be in that small space? And say you like the feathers. Then you might change your thread weight to accommodate that much thread. There's a lot of thread there, but you could space those loops out if you wanted to. This would require a lot of thread too. When you're circling, doing those purls, you have a lot of overlapping. And there's a wishbone type. And ultimately, I end up picking the wishbone. That's the design that I chose. But do you see the benefit of previewing and how this plexiglass helped me select which one I wanted to do? How many of you preview designs? Do you preview designs? How do you do it? Do you use plexiglass? Do you use, some like to use that wrap paper that you use in the kitchen. What is it called? You were thinking about the loops and the spacing. Yes, good idea. You use preview, Sharon? Okay, I'm not sure what that means. I think just like I see it in my head. All right, you do too. Okay. All right. Yes, cling. That's it. Thank you. People have used that kitchen cling wrap and put that over their quilt. And I've tried that, but I felt like I would go off that cling wrap. But that's another way. Hey, welcome. So glad you're here. Awesome. You use plexiglass. Wonderful. Yay. All right, let's go to the next one. So now that we have our top sewn together, we have all the cathedral window bias curves stitched down. Then we put it on the quilt sandwich, and we've stitched and stabilized the quilt sandwich by stitching along the edge and stitching within each of those wedges, just outside and around each cathedral window. That stitching was done beside or by the edge of the cathedral window, not on top. Those flaps are still open, okay? You use clear vinyl. That's another neat idea. Neat idea. Awesome. All right. So now that it's stabilized, I can start quilting anywhere. I can start doing the decorative quilting along the edge or inside the center. In this case, I've decided to do a crosshatch with an acrylic ruler. And this is a curve ruler. In your quilting journey, you're going to come across various types of curves. You have the drunkard's path, you have the cathedral window. What else is a curved design? I can't think of another one. If you know of another curve pattern, let us know in the comments. What curve quilt pattern design have you made? All those curves are different, so not every curve ruler is going to work. So I went through my curve rulers to see which one was closest to the arc of this curve. Oh, this apple core is another curve. Good idea. Awesome. Thank you, Rosemary. I'm so glad that you're getting some great ideas to help you in your quilting journey. What is that ruler? You love it. Yes, that is a Westerly Design arc or curve ruler. I'm going to show you the rulers that I pulled out to see which one would be the right curve. These are all the arc or curve rulers I have. The smallest one there is the 4-inch arc. The next one is a 6-inch. Then in between that, I forget what the other two are. They're not marked on the ruler. Those two are from Accents in Design. Accents in Design makes curve and straight rulers, and those are two in the center that have more of a shallow curve. And there are some quilt block designs that don't have a deep curve. But for this project, the Cathedral Window has a deep curve, and I used that 12-inch arc for the Cathedral Window. Winding Ways. Yes, that's it, Janice. I was trying to think of Winding Ways. Winding Ways is another one that has a curve. Yep. And the Wedding Ring. Yes, all of those have a different arc or a different curve. And so depending upon what your preference is, you might pick a ruler that's going to work with several of those or maybe one or two of those. Thank you, ladies. You remember your quilt patterns and designs. Wonderful. Let me go back one. Okay, so that's the 12-inch arc, and it was perfect for this design. I need to get something to drink. Hold on. Thank you, ladies, for waiting. Okay. Wonderful. Much better now. All right. Since it was a perfect curve, I could easily do a crosshatch and use the lines on the rulers to do the crosshatch. I was able to do that very easily in each of those sections along the perimeter of this cathedral window. All right, let's move to the next one. So from doing the crosshatch with a ruler foot and ruler, I moved into stitching in between each cathedral window. You love the crosshatch but wouldn't know how to do it. Basically, it's stitching. I'll go back one. Okay. You see how that acrylic ruler is on the edge of that cathedral window? Once I put my ruler down to stitch, I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch away from the edge of that cathedral window. Then I stitch along the edge, along that red border, right there in the seam, until I'm another 1/4 inch away. And I just shift the ruler over and then I stitch again. So basically, you're stitching curves. I'm doing straight lines, so I mean curves. You're stitching curves in one direction. Then you're stitching the opposite direction. So when you stitch all the curves this way, then you stitch the next one this way. So you're going to get a crosshatch because you're overlapping those 1/4 distant curves. You're stitching, and those, the crosshatch could be a 1/4 inch, it could be a 1/2 inch, it could be 3/4. It's up to you. But the main thing is that you repeat the same distance. You stitch one curve, then you stitch the next. You could do the quilting while sewing down the curves by quilting as the clamshell. No turning necessary. Okay, you get it, Copper. Great. Wonderful. All right. Well, now you get it. Wonderful. All right. Okay. All right. So after the crosshatch was done, then I just proceeded to the next step. So remember, I like to do things and I recommend to do them in steps. We have steps and they're small incremental steps so that if I need to shift and go another direction, there's not going to be a problem doing that. So now stitching in between each one of those cathedral windows. And you can move across without breaking thread through each one. And so I would look at the quilt and say, how can I stitch continuously? What's the longest path that I can stitch continuously without breaking thread? Let's see. Here's an overhead view so that you can see I stitched this on my home machine. The crosshatch is done. And now I'm stitching in between each cathedral window. Also notice that I have not stitched that red border. It's a very small border. It's nice to know. It's easy to make. Great. Okay, it's really easy line work going in different directions. Okay, great. How to keep from catching the edge of the cathedral window? Good question. Good question. You go very slow when you get that close, basically. And because you're doing, well, let me backtrack. Sherry, that's a good question. I did catch the cathedral window a couple of times because I got overconfident. And I learned that I needed to slow my pace as I got to the edge of the window. It would be similar to stitching around like applique. Anytime there's an area in our quilt project that we don't want to stitch over, but we have to come close to, we learn, just like we're driving in a car. I always use this analogy. You learn over time how fast you can go on a curve when you're driving. You know you have to slow down. Same thing with this. I have practiced over time to learn how to slow down, but to keep going. When we're driving in a car and we are coming on a curve, we don't stop. We keep driving. We just slow down so that we can take that curve at a gentle pace without getting out of control or rolling over. There was no reason I could have done the other one first. Because it was already stabilized, I had already stitched in each of those wedges around the cathedral windows. I could have did the crosshatch first, or I could have done the stitching inside. The benefit of stabilizing a quilt beforehand, sometimes we don't know exactly how we're going to quilt it. We have a general idea, but the parts that we do know, we can quilt that, and then maybe by the end of finishing that step, we can quilt the next part. And as I was putting this together, I thought about that because I thought someone might ask. And it could be that I didn't exactly know how I was going to stitch in between or around those cathedral windows. Remember, I did this in 2018, and I am learning that my memory just is not as good as it once was. That's just the way it is. And speaking of memory, I must apologize to you, Copper. I've already made notations on the recorded replays from last week's live session when we talked about how we quilt or place a quilting design and about directional patterns. In that heading home pattern, you were correct, and I said that you weren't, so please forgive me. I went back and watched the replay because I went and made it shorter so people can watch just the main parts. And as I was doing that, I said, Copper was right. How could I forget how I quilted my own project? And guess what? I did. I forgot. So you were right. And heading home, Plume Party was all being quilted toward the center. And so I made a notation on both videos apologizing to you, Copper, and saying you were correct. Um, yes, Sherry, by densely quilting in between each of those cathedral windows, it really makes those windows pop, doesn't it? I like that too. And you are welcome, Copper, for that explanation. All right, so that part is done. What happens next? I want to show you what it looks like in the back. Now, remember a couple of lives we talked about applique, and I showed you how I did the bed runner with the leaves and the two stages I had with the leaves in terms of stitching down the leaves and prior to making the quilt sandwich. And as a result, when you looked at the back, you still only, even though they were stitching two, even though I stitched around the leaves twice, when you looked at the back, you only saw the stitch that went around once when it became a quilt sandwich. The same thing here. Because I stabilized those edges along the cathedral window when it was still just a quilt top, you're only going to see on the back one layer of stitching around the cathedral window. So here it is. You don't see it twice. You only see it once. And it was done after the edges along the cathedral window had a top stitch to hold down those edges, and then stitched underneath or beside the edges to stabilize the quilt sandwich. All right. You see the back. You like that? Thank you, Sherry. Oh, you're welcome, Copper. I'm glad you like these ideas. Breaking it down step by step, it helps simplify the process. But guess what? It also allows us to do a quilt project over small increments of time. We don't always have a lot of time. But if we get a half hour, 45 minutes, 15 minutes, and we know that step, oh, I can do that step in 30 minutes. I can sew tonight for 30 minutes before I go to bed because that's one small step. Yes, I met a second design. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you like it, Benita. So what I've shown you now is part of the back, not the full back. Remember in the previous photo, which I'll go back to, there's that red border. Are you wondering what did she do with that red border? the red border, excellent point. It's not so overwhelming. Exactly. Excellent point. Yes, Wilda, a reversible quilt. Reversible quilt. So you're confused. All right. Is that straight stitching and wishbone, or does the wishbone make it look like straight stitching? It is straight stitching. Remember, prior to making the quilt sandwich, I stitched down the top of all the cathedral windows. I did a top stitch. That was on the quilt top only. So you would not see that stitching on the back, right? Once the quilt sandwich was made, I stitched straight stitching, good eyes, along the edges, not on top of the cathedral windows, but right next to them to stabilize the quilt. So that's what you see. You see the straight stitching around the wishbone. That straight stitching was the first stitching on the quilt sandwich that stabilized the quilt. Okay. Wonderful. Yes. Excellent. Some of you might have to watch the video over again to, hello, Bonnie. Awesome. So glad you're here. Yay, you made it. All right, so now we're going to get to what did she do with that red fabric? Which quilt was it? It was the bed runner. What kind of finishing technique? That bed runner did not have a binding. Instead, it had facing. So what you see, this is the finished cathedral window. And that red border is actually a faux red binding. It's a faux binding. All right, you're probably thinking, red fabric into a binding. You got it, Copper. That's it. The red fabric was sewn on as a border, but it became the binding because I used the facing technique to finish the quilt. So this is what it looks like in the back. This is the full picture. This is the facing, where you stitch, top stitch fabric, and then fold it to the back and stitch it in place. It creates this border around the back. Okay, let's go back. This is the front. That red border, that small red border, when you look at it from the front, it just looks like binding. It is a border that has been faced. And the reason why it looks like binding, because remember in that step back, when I first made the quilt sandwich, I did a stitch in the ditch around the edge of that quilt sandwich. All right. Yes, hand stitch the back. And ladies, I have to confess, I still have not stitched that back because hand stitching is laborious to me. And I usually hand stitch in quilt meetings, in airports, and on planes. So I haven't been to a quilt meeting in over a year, and I haven't been on a plane in more than a year, or an airport. So that kind of work just isn't getting done. Yes, that is it. Okay, so now you see all the stages. You've seen all the stages of quilting this cathedral window. Now, of course, this is just one way to quilt it. Some people, excuse me, some people don't quilt in between the cathedral windows. They may do the quilt as you go that you will see in Jenny Dolan's video, or they may stitch just a little bit in between each one. It's really up to you. Yes, I have a ton of hand stitching to do. I could spend a week in an airport just doing hand binding. I don't know that denim would be too heavy. It just depends. There's some light denims. And because you're not stitching in the window, most cathedral windows that I've seen, no one stitches inside the window. So it might be okay. I would try it. Do a test block. Thank you, Copper. Yeah, it just really makes it pop, doesn't it? When you stitch down those tight stitching in between each cathedral window. Love it. All right, ladies. Any other questions on this project? Any other questions? So glad you were here again tonight. Can you believe it? It's been an hour already. Yes, the time flies. We looked at a very traditional quilt pattern design, the cathedral window. If you haven't tried it, you can try it on a small scale. There's several out there that are tutorials on how to make a pillow, how to make a wall hanging, and I've even seen one where they use a cathedral window to create stars for a flag, for a U.S. flag. So all the stars were cathedral windows. That sounds like a fun project. Any questions? Well, you're welcome, Sharon. I'm so glad you were able to be here. Have a wonderful weekend and good week. You're welcome, Copper. I hope everyone has a good weekend too. It was good to be together. Hope you got some tips. Maybe the cathedral window is not your cup of tea, but some of the quilting techniques, like using the plexiglass, working in small stages. You're welcome, Monica. You're welcome, Benita. Yes, Sharon, Lord willing, Copper. That is so true. Thank you, Janice. Thank you for being here. Ladies, don't forget, like the video, give it a thumbs up. That helps YouTube know that people like it, and then they will share it with others so they can also learn some of these tips and techniques for quilting their own projects. I appreciate each and every one of you and thankful that you're willing to give me an hour of your time each week. Thank you, Bonnie. Be safe. Thank you, everyone. And if you're on Facebook, hey, come on over to YouTube. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do that. Like the videos that you watch and comment. And if some of you have tried to comment and haven't been able to, or you see that it's moderated comments, that's because I had people comment with lewd things, not very nice things. So I had to turn on comment moderation. But please don't let that stop you from asking questions or making comments. Hey, Lois. Yeah, I'm glad that you were able to join even though it was late. And I hope you enjoy the replay. And if you ask questions after the replay, I will come back, of course, and I will answer them. Just because you weren't here during the live session or you missed part of the live session doesn't mean that I won't answer your questions. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe. And if you can sew, sew. If you can't sew, dream about sewing. I will see you next week.